Hey there, you're listening to the Start Something podcast, where we take you behind the scenes of the founder journey, breaking down what it takes and how it can change your life. My name is Bailey.
And my name is Shruti, and today we're going to learn all about Bailey's story and how she started her startup at 22 years old, and now has most recently been featured on the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes 30 Under 30, which is an insane accomplishment. So if we could just start with that. What the heck, Bailey? Tell me all about it. What does it feel like to be on the other side?
Okay, well, it feels exactly the same on this side as it did on the other side.
No.
But I will say it was so exciting to be not only nominated for the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, but to actually end up on it, just because my co-founder and I have been working so hard for so many years on our company, and being able to reach that huge group of people
caliber
are exposed to the Forbes list and meet the other, Forbes 30 Under 30 listers was, I think, just such an honor that we fought so hard to reach.
Yeah.
And it's not like that was the North Star, but it's one of those things that makes you feel like, oh wow, we are really doing something crazy here.
Of course, I can't even imagine. And maybe for those who don't know, because it's not every single person who gets to experience being on there, how did you find out about it? How did you feel? How did you react?
Yeah, so Forbes doesn't reach out and tell you that you've been on Forbes 30 Under 30.
Okay.
So basically, my co-founder Noah found out first. He woke up and he noticed that he was added to the 30 Under 30 Slack channel. And he takes a screenshot of it, and he texted to me, and he's like, does this mean? And sure enough, the first thing I do is I Google our names, Forbes 30 Under 30, and we come up.
That's
and I'm
amazing.
like, oh my gosh, we're there. But no one told us.
That's crazy.
We had no idea. We found out because we were added to a Slack channel.
That's insane.
That's it.
And so Silicon Valley, for lack of better words.
It's there is no method to the madness.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone thinks that there's a structure and organization and good communication behind all the things that we see. No, there's absolutely no method to the madness.
Great to hear everyone has their stuff together, you know? But let's rewind a little. You're here now, Forbes 30 Under 30. Why don't we take everyone back to where were you born?
Yeah.
Why don't we start there? Tell me a little bit about your childhood, and I just want to learn about you and your story.
So I was born in the East Bay, but when I was 6 months old, my family moved us up north to Sonoma County, which is about an hour north of San Francisco. And they moved us up there because my dad got a job at Petaluma Fire Department. So my dad was a firefighter, my mom was a paramedic, and we moved up when it was just me and my older brother. And over the next few years, my parents had 3 more kids. So I have 4 brothers. I'm the second of 5.
Wow.
And one of the crazy things that my parents decided to do, in addition to having 5 children, was they decided to homeschool all of us.
Oh my gosh.
And so we grew up in Sonoma County, all of us homeschooled, basically our entire lives up until college. When I was growing up, I'm very competitive. I have 4 brothers. I think that kind of goes without saying, but I hated being homeschooled because I wanted to be in a group of people who were all going for it. I wanted to, I played in rec leagues growing up, sports, but I wasn't able to be or aim to be on a varsity team or something like that. And so I always craved that bigger world environment than just being at home with my brothers, and then occasionally once a week maybe going to a homeschool co-op where the other parents would teach classes for the kids.
Oh wow.
And so I always wanted to get out there and be in a bigger environment. And looking back, I feel very differently. Looking back, I'm so grateful that I was homeschooled. And my parents always told me that. They said, just you wait, Bailey, one day you will be so glad that we homeschooled you. And I was like, sure, you don't have any idea. You don't know what I'm going through. And looking back now, I feel like it truly is one of the greatest gifts they could have ever given me, because by the time I went to UC Berkeley, school was still so new and exciting to me that I was just all in. I was absolutely obsessed, and I wasn't burnt out on school at all. And so I got into UC Berkeley after going to my local junior college. And so I went from the local junior college, transferred into Berkeley.
Okay.
And 36,000 students, I was I was in heaven. I was like, this is what I always wanted. Like,
That's
huge
amazing.
school. Like, UC Berkeley is basically, is larger than my hometown. So like, just the number
No
of
way.
people. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Oh my God.
So I say that I'm from Santa Rosa because most people know Santa Rosa, but I was actually raised in the suburbs outside of Santa Rosa in a place called Rohnert Park.
Okay.
And Rohnert Park they don't even have a downtown. Like it's barely a town.
Okay.
And UC Berkeley, when I was growing up, literally had more students than like Rohnert Park had residents.
That's so crazy.
And so it was my dream.
Yeah.
It was perfect for me.
Yeah. Why did you choose Berkeley? Like, did you know you always wanted to be a founder? Where did that come from?
No, not at all. And I definitely knew that I wanted to do something in business. Like I was always very entrepreneurial, but I never thought I'd do something in technology.
Okay.
And something that's really different about your story and my story is, you grew up in Silicon Valley, like breathing in all of the tech ecosystem.
Yeah.
And I grew up thinking that Silicon Valley is where they made silicon.
No way.
Yeah, like I literally thought that, and I don't just mean when I was like 5 years old I thought that, I mean when I was 15 years old I still thought that. I think that just goes to show how, we can grow up in a very like sheltered ecosystem, and I mean I was in this homeschool conservative town. I mean most of the women that I grew up with, they weren't even thinking about going to college.
Wow.
And so it was just such a different world than the way that people are raised, like in Silicon Valley, just like an hour south. Like you talked about going to an all-girls high school and being exposed to technology. It's like, and all these girls are like getting, learning about technology as well. No, that is not what growing up in my community was like. So I never thought that I would go to a school like UC Berkeley. I always wanted to go to a school for art. And so when I was a kid, I remember...
You want to talk about, for one little pause, because you are the artist of the century.
What? Can you tell my mom that? What do you mean?
That one photo where you've painted...
The chocolate?
Yes. I think you need to tell everyone just a little bit about your chocolate painting, and then we can go back.
I'm actually really glad when I moved to Berkeley that people stopped asking me if I was the girl who painted with chocolate, because that's kind of how I became known in my tiny community.
I'm trying to bring it
Rosa.
back. Like, on this podcast, everyone's gonna know you like that.
So growing up, I was obsessed with art, and I am like super ADHD, but when it comes to art, I am just so focused.
Yeah.
Like I usually have to pee every 30 minutes, but when I'm drawing or painting, it's like everything stops. I'm totally immersed, totally focused.
That's amazing.
I don't drink water. I don't have to pee. The sun will set and I won't even notice. Like sometimes my mom would open my door and I'd be like literally laying on the floor drawing with the lights off in the dark. And she'd be like, Bailey, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing?
God.
Like, do you want the light on? And I was like, I'm gonna be honest, Mom, like, I didn't even notice. She's like, that's bad for your eyes. I'm like, I didn't even think about it. Like, I thought that I wanted to go to school for art. And when I was a kid, I Googled at the family computer, what's the best college for art? And Google said that it was Yale.
Okay.
And so I was like, that's it. I'm going to Yale. I don't know anything about schools. Neither of my parents went to college. And so going to college was not a priority in my family, but I'm very competitive and I really liked art, so I knew I am Yale bound.
Yeah.
But in high school, when I started going to my junior college, Santa Rosa JC, I was teacher pressured into joining the speech and debate team.
Wow.
And I really loved it.
Oh my God.
Of course. And the speech and debate team took me to UC Berkeley for one of the tournaments. And I remember walking on to Cal's campus, like Sproul Plaza, like right off of University, right off of Bancroft, and like, as soon as I walked on, I knew, I'm gonna go to school here.
That's crazy.
And then the story part of me, like the storytelling part of me kicked in and was like, what? No, you don't want to be in California. You want to be on the East Coast. Like, what are you talking about? You don't know anything about this school. Like, you're going to Yale.
I love that you're playing yourself.
Oh, it's so real. That's what it's like to be in my head. And I get this feeling, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to school here.
That's amazing.
And I'm so grateful, because if I had to like decide which school I was going to go to and do like some cost benefit analysis of every university other than Yale, oh my gosh, it would have been a mess. I would have been a mess. It was messy anyway, but so I knew. And when I applied I didn't even apply to Yale.
Wow.
I applied to UC Berkeley. I did apply as an art major.
Wow.
And I changed my degree program literally at orientation. I was like,
wow.
There's no way this is for me anymore. Now, when you apply to the UC system, you can check a couple other boxes. So I did apply to like Davis and UCLA. But for me, if I wasn't going to Berkeley, I wasn't going anywhere. It was Berkeley or nothing. So I actually, back then, I did think to myself, like, well, if I don't get into Berkeley, I guess I could always just go, like, I could go to Yale. Like, I could move to New Haven and just start going to the classes. Like, if I just blended in, maybe no one would even notice. It's like, I could basically get a degree without ever going to the university. Anyway, long story short, decided to major in rhetoric. So I went from an art major to a rhetoric major, which is like, these are definitely in the same band. Like, no one hears that you're getting an art degree or a rhetoric degree and knows what you're gonna do for a job. Like,
interesting.
Everyone's worried about you.
And at this point, you also didn't know that you wanted to have your own company, right? Just to clarify to...
Yeah, definitely not a tech company, but when I was a kid, I kind of always suspected that I'd run a business of some sort, just because I was so entrepreneurial. I started with my next door neighbor and best friend. I started a baking company, and we were literally just going door to door, like selling baked goods that we made. And that was kind of my first taste, besides the lemonade stands, that was my first taste of the entrepreneurial journey. And I think that experience taught me more about running a company than any of the other like fancy internships or anything like that, because it started with us having lemonade stands and realizing that, we're not in a good place for this. Like, the cars, we get like no foot traffic. The cars don't want to stop when they drive past. Like, no one actually is buying our lemonade. And so we decided, well, how could we be more convincing? And so we decided, well, let's go door to door. Like, let's just go knock on people's doors and offer them lemonade. And then we realized, well, we probably can't transport lemonade very effectively. So what could we sell them instead of lemonade? And we decided, well, everyone wants cookies. So we want cookies, we want to eat the cookies. So let's bake the cookies and sell half of them to our neighbors and half of them we can consume. And we did. We really did.
That's amazing.
Neither of us ever got sick, but we ate so much raw cookie dough. Like, it's just wrong how much raw cookie dough we ate.
One takeaway is you should go to a doctor sometime soon. Just like check in on yourself. I don't know about that and how good or bad it is for you, but we're not the experts on your bodies right now.
Okay, good.
But I do want to call out something really important that ties into being a founder, right? A lot of times there are a lot of people who want to start something. The name of our podcast is Start Something. And so a lot of people take this route of educating themselves. They're like, let me take this class, let me go get this degree, let me do this. And it sounds like what you're saying is, yes, I did get the degree, yes, I did study something, but what really impacted me was my real world experience of like starting something, literally anything, right?
Yeah.
As simple as a lemonade stand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where we really learn. I think that's where entrepreneurs learn how to be entrepreneurs. But literally just starting something will teach you infinitely more than reading about startups in a book, kind of like learning how to ride a bike or something. It's like, yeah, you could read every single book on riding a bike, but until you actually get on the bike, you have no idea how to ride,
Exactly. And to those who aren't, 5 years old anymore and who can sell cookies door to door, what do you recommend if someone wanted to start something today? Like how can they take that first step?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it really comes down to getting clear about the problems in your life and the things the areas where you feel like you have needs. And we tend to solve the problems in our life by, whether it's, paying for something. Like, here's an example of a very small problem. I'm cold all the time. My hands are cold, my feet are cold. Like, that's a problem, and I solve it with fuzzy socks, with gloves, with sitting on the heater vent at my apartment. There's all sorts of ways. Yeah, right? Every single day, that's what I do. But even little tiny problems, like once we start to notice those little issues, and that's a very first world issue when you live in a place like California and it never gets colder than like 40 degrees in the Bay Area. When you start paying attention to those problems and you start brainstorming potential solutions to those problems, then it's really easy to start stumbling upon ideas that you might be really excited to work on. So if you figure out, okay, I'm passionate about, this area, this area, this area, I know I want to do something in this space, then you can kind of do a deep dive there and start talking to people, interviewing folks who are in those communities and asking them, like, what are your challenges that you are still facing? When I was a kid, I thought that everything had already been invented.
Me too, yeah.
I was like, I want to be an inventor, but there's literally nothing left to invent. Like, we've already gone to the moon, like we already have airplanes.
Shoot, everything's already made,
But I can't tell you how many versions of a food delivery app I've seen pitched by entrepreneurs, student entrepreneurs especially, and it makes me realize, oh my gosh, there are always little solutions or huge solutions that we can develop to the challenges that we face.
Let's continue back on the journey.
Yeah.
So you're in college, and I want to know, eventually you're studying rhetoric. How do you get to building Perimeter? Because you started that in college, which is crazy. Right. And I would love for everyone to even learn, what the heck is Perimeter about? Let's talk about both of those things.
So in college, I'm interested in entrepreneurship, like I mentioned, but definitely not in tech. And in my rhetoric program, I met a friend of mine named Jarrett, and Jarrett had just come back from this incredible study abroad entrepreneurship program.
Wow.
And we met on day one and clicked immediately. And he said, Bailey, you need to go to the same program that I just did. And because I clicked with Jarrett so much, we had this instant connection. I was like, I trust this guy.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna do it. And I told him on the first day of school, I'm like, okay, Jarrett, next summer I'm going to this program. And sure enough, less than a year later, I was on my way to Italy for this startup competition. I don't know anything about startups.
Wow.
The business I wanted to start a fashion business that used recycled plastics to make pants that actually had pockets. And
wow, we're both into fashion, aren't we?
Yeah, and I wanted to solve multiple problems that I was being exposed to. One, fast fashion is destroying the world, and why are we not using these materials that we don't know what to do with?
Yeah.
So that's a large problem that I wanted to put a dent in. And two, why in the world do my pants not have pockets? And now pants do have way more pockets. My pants that I'm wearing right now, deep pockets, love it. But when I was in high school, I literally never had a pair of pants that had pockets, only a chapstick pocket, half an inch. They're terrible, the fake pockets. And so I was like, okay, great. I'll start this company and everyone will be excited because obviously it's awesome. But I go to this startup competition, I start pitching my peers just to get people to join my team, and nobody wanted to join my team.
Why do you think that is?
Because the startup culture and the startup environment that I was in was all focused on the power of technology, of course. So people didn't want to start my recycled bottle fashion company. They wanted to start the next Google. And
makes sense.
And I'm like, shoot. Well, I should probably join someone else's team then and learn something about technology.
You also said, shoot, where am I going to get pockets in my pants now?
I'm going to have to learn to make my own pants. So I decided to join someone else's team.
Okay.
And it was a great experience because even though I wasn't running things at the startup, the sort of fake startup that we were running, I knew that I wanted to be a part of a startup in some capacity. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm super ADHD. And for me, being in the startup environment is the first time where I felt like my personality traits were all not just welcome, they were advantages.
Yeah.
And I felt like my high energy and the fact that I can obsessively focus on things that I'm interested in, but throw out the things that I'm not interested in, that was all an advantage. And the next year when I went back, I started working at another startup and just getting exposed to more technology. I was working on the sales arm, so I wasn't an engineer for the company, but I was still getting exposed to tech. And then the next year, something happens that changed my life forever, which is my hometown experienced a devastating wildfire called the Tubbs Fire. And this is in 2017. It was one of the first, not the first, but one of the first of those, quote unquote, unprecedented fires that has been just destroying, devastating communities in California and on the West Coast and other places in the past few years. But it was the first of 5 evacuations that I would go through with my family. Wow. So it started with Tubbs, but in the past 8 years, we've had 5 major evacuations.
Wow, and your dad is literally...
He's a firefighter.
Yeah.
So in that community, and Again, this is not a problem that I ever thought I would have been exposed to. Despite having a firefighter dad, I had no exposure to fires growing up. I just stop, drop, and roll. Don't get a real Christmas tree, you know. Don't, you know, keep your wires away from your bathtub, you know. Like, I feel like I got the basics, but I was not exposed to a wildfire.
Sure.
And at this point, I'd just come back from this startup, this like startup competition. I'm working in the tech world, being exposed to a lot of technology. And then when my family's evacuated, we have absolutely no resources or information about where to go, how to get there. And I thought that we would have had the best technology for those to answer those types of questions. And what I realized is we have amazing technology for advertising, for, you know, food delivery apps out in Silicon Valley, but my dad isn't being tracked in the field as a firefighter, and yet when I use DoorDash, I can track a burrito every meter on its way to my house. And I was like, how is this possible? And that is when I realized the huge gap that exists between the technology that has been developed today and the industries or the people that technology has actually been able to serve.
So can you like walk through what happened before you built your company? Like, what does it look like when one of these big fires start? Like,
So during these fires, the way that most first responders are sharing information or getting information about what's happening is they will literally get a paper map in the morning that has information about the incident, and they will have that map until the next morning when they get a new paper map. And so there's never been more of a need for real-time information than these disasters. And yet at the time, I'm working at a different tech company, and I was on a team that was doing advertising technology. And so I knew these big tech companies were spending billions of dollars developing algorithms that could help companies decide if they were going to show you a Nike ad or an Adidas ad based on your preferences online. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how are there all these resources going into deciding if we're going to show you the red ad or the blue ad, and yet all of these first responders are limited to using paper maps and radios to get their information during disasters. And that was such a big problem that I didn't think for a second that I could solve that problem. Instead, what I thought is, oh, well, someone who's qualified, who's already running a tech company, should just start building this, and maybe with my exposure to tech and startups, maybe I could help communicate what needs to be developed.
But let's take a pause there, because I think that's something really important that should sit in. Can you talk about why you thought that?
Yeah. So at the time, I'm a student. I have no experience running a company besides my baking business when I was a kid. And again, I'm not an engineer. And at that time, I did start taking some computer science classes, but just enough to like work on some projects, not enough to build a tech company. And so the story in my head was, well, who am I to think that I could in any way help solve a problem that is clearly very, very hard to solve, otherwise someone already would have done it by now. And so I start approaching these other big mapping companies, and I start saying to them, like, hey, listen, people like my dad, they're using paper maps, they don't have information. Can you please develop something that we can use in my community to help first responders and residents get this real-time information that could save our lives? What the companies told me was like, well, tell your dad, instead of developing something for this use case, tell your dad to start taking a mapping class so that he can use our technical fancy mapping systems.
No way.
And I'm like, my dad is never going to take a mapping class.
He's just a little busy fighting a fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Just slightly little time consuming.
It's never going to happen. I was still trying to figure out, like, what can I do to have an impact here? Because I know about the problem, like I can't outrun it. I know that I need to do something about it.
Yeah.
And the next year is when Northern California had the Camp Fire in the town of Paradise. And the Camp Fire was a fire that, even though it was, up in Northern California in Butte County, it impacted many, many counties across the West Coast because of what a devastating fire it was. And I was on campus and I was wearing an N95 mask, like trying to protect myself from the smoke. And I went to meet up with one of my professors. I asked if he'd meet me to talk about this problem and this idea. I'd never heard of a disaster tech startup before.
Yeah.
But I sat down with him and I asked, I'm like, please tell me, maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like there's a huge need here. Like, people are losing their lives because they don't have this information. And I think what they need is a platform, a way of getting real-time information from the people who know what's going on, from the emergency managers. He told me, he looked at me and he said, Bailey, you have to do this. And I was like, me? You mean like a qualified person? like what do you mean me? Like, I'm a student, I'm a rhetoric major. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I was studying art 2 years ago. Like, I am not a person who can build this company. But he really believed in me. In that moment, in that conversation, I knew. I was like, okay. I realized, I'm like, if Shomit believes in me, maybe I could do something. Like, maybe I could. Maybe I could bring a team together who has all the skills that I don't have. Maybe this is possible.
Yeah, no, and I wanted to pause right there, because I think something that you highlighted right now in this part of your story and journey that is so important to me as well is building a set of, your personal board advisors, right? Like, that's the terminology that I think we use now more formally, but really having a network or a set of people who can support you, because when I think the power of someone believing in you is insane. It can make you do crazy things, and it sounds, there you go, crazy things like starting a company. So I don't know if you have more than even just this professor, but I wanted to talk about this personal advisor board really quickly. Yeah, so many people for me are on that personal board of advisors, and it's not formal. It's not like we get together every 2 months to have a board meeting or something, but these are people who have had a really big impact on my life and who have helped me take those next steps when, for me, there are so many unknowns. Like, I literally don't know the first thing about starting a tech company, but if this person believes in me and they're encouraging me and they're telling me, like, you can figure it out, then maybe I can. Yeah. And I think just knowing that there's a chance that you could do it, that you could make it, that you could make something happen, and having one person believe in you, even if that person is yourself, but having one person say, like, I think you could figure this out, sometimes is the fuel that you need to say, well, maybe I'll just start, right? And that's what we're talking about, is like, okay, how can I just start even when I don't have all the answers? Because no matter how much experience you have, you never will have all the answers. Like, we're all trying to make the best decisions we can with incredibly impartial information. And so he's definitely, on my personal board of advisors. The person that I learned about entrepreneurship from, his name is Ken Singer. He's also an instructor at UC Berkeley. He's the person who made me realize that there's a chance that the skills that I had, even though I'm not an engineer, I knew that those skills could be meaningful as a founder. So he didn't just talk about things like computer science. He talked about empathy and being able to read a room and being able to take complex, emotional information from people and be able to interpret it in terms of a solution that could serve them. Exactly. And I'm like, well, I'm really empathetic. Like, I love unpacking. You are. Thank you. I'm like, I love unpacking things with people. I love understanding people. Yeah. And maybe if I could find a really amazing technical co-founder, then I could focus on, understanding the problem and the people who need the solution. And I could work with him really closely to figure out what that solution actually looks like. And then, of course, build it. And that's when I started talking to one of my previous classmates. We started talking, and I asked him, like, hey, what year are you? And he's like, oh, I'm a junior. And I said, oh, bummer, because if you were a senior, I'd really like to start this company with you. I need someone to start it with. I'm looking for a co-founder. And he said, well, how about you pitch me and maybe I'll drop out? And I'm like, this guy's not going to drop out. What is he talking about? So I don't follow up with him. And he texts me a few weeks later and he's like, hey, aren't you gonna pitch me on your startup idea? And I'm like, okay, sure. So we meet for coffee near campus and I tell him about the problem that we're facing in Sonoma County. And right there, he says, okay, I'm gonna drop out, let's do this. And I'm like, what? Are you serious? And we've been co-founders for the last 5 years. That's amazing. We are such a good team, and people have asked me, like, how do you choose a co-founder? And looking back, if I
had known what an important relationship this would have been, I would have like put him through the ringer in terms of like an interview process.
Wait, vice versa.
But I didn't do that. And I feel like we just kind of, for me personally, like I feel like I kind of won the lottery with co-founders because it just worked.
Yeah.
And like you talked about in your episode, like it's a really challenging experience, and going through it with someone else who can point out your blind spots and, you know, make up for the areas where like you don't have strengths with their strengths. It's necessary if you want to achieve anything. And so I think we've been able to be that for each other, and we've been able to have a pretty big impact, but it definitely has been a long and arduous and like twisting and turning journey. Like it's not you decide to start a company and like suddenly you're on Forbes 30 under 30 and like everything is roses. Like this journey has been one of the most challenging things I have ever done in my life. If you're a person who is excited about becoming the best version of yourself or like creating your dream life, being in this type of environment is one of the best things you could possibly ask for, because you will learn so much. I think in the future, moving forward, one of my goals for being here, and I think, you know, you share this too, is, you know, we have learned so many things the hard way. Yeah. And I didn't have a lot of people that I could go to for advice, not just, you know, founders that I knew, but also especially female founders. I knew very, very few female founders at the time, and I hope that in having these conversations, we're able to save people a lot of time so that they don't have to learn all of the lessons the hard way that we had to learn the hard way.
Seriously, I totally agree. I mean, it's a blessing that you and I got to even get to know each other this entire year. It's now been almost a year that we've known each other. Let's go back to because you're giving me bits and pieces of your story, but I don't think we've still like uncovered what exactly is Perimeter?
Yeah,
like, let's talk about that for a hot second.
That's pretty important. So Perimeter is a mapping platform that first responders use to share information with each other and with residents during emergencies and natural disasters. So for first responders, it's an iOS or Android app, and for residents, it's just a website, a web app, a link that they can go to get information about where am I, what's happening, and what do I need to do. So whether you're in an evacuation zone, or there are hazards that you need to steer clear of, or a certain evacuation route that's been highlighted, or resources, shelters, sandbag locations, like whatever emergency management and all of the first responders, whatever they need to communicate to residents to help them stay safe, they can use our platform to do that.
That's amazing, like absolutely amazing. And if I had to guess where your tool is today is not where you started from?
Yeah, right. So there have definitely been some pivots in the journey. One of the things that surprised me early on is I was so focused on the wildfire use case that I didn't realize as soon as we started talking to potential customers, what we realized is our platform would be used for a huge range of different types of events, emergencies, incidents. In public safety, they would refer to this as like an all hazards platform, because it's going to be used not just for fires, but for all sorts of incidents, and not necessarily just emergencies. It can also be used for special events, anytime first responders need to coordinate between each other. And as someone who has 2 first responder parents, I know that even something as simple as a concert, you'll have paramedics in the crowd who are dressed normally like they're going to the concert, but they'll be in the crowd in case someone needs medical attention very quickly. And so I know firsthand that there are all these environments where first responders are working together but not always able to coordinate. And so it started with fires, but it's so much bigger than that.
That's amazing. And something that I want to even touch on, there's a reason why you're able to see things through this lens now. You probably couldn't see it back then, right? You just started off with the fire, and now you're able to determine all these other use cases with your platform. How did you stay so persistent? Like, that was something that we talked about in the previous episode that you've clearly done. You've been working on this company for how many years now?
5.
There you go. Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about what keeps you motivated? What drives you?
Yeah. I think with my company, it's really unique because there is such sorry for this pun, but there is a burning need
Oh God.
for the platform. No, I'm serious. Like, there is literally a burning need. Like, there were actually fires. Like, I'm sorry, I have to use it because it's like, there is literally fires, floods, all these incidents that people don't have information about how to respond to. And it's not like, when I think about the people who don't have the information they need to make decisions, it's not like a vague image for me. It's something that I've experienced with my family, with my community 5 times.
Yeah, that's
and so
crazy.
It's just so drilled into me that this problem exists. And I know for me, I don't want to be on the planet working on problems and developing solutions, solving problems that don't have a big impact. Like, I always knew that if I was working at a job that didn't have a positive impact on the world, like, I knew that I would never be able to be satisfied in any capacity. And for me, like, let's say I went and got a fancy job at a place like Google. I knew that I would always know, looking back, that I had the exposure to this problem, the evacuation problem, the fires, et cetera. And I would always know that I could have done something about it. And I knew that I would regret not trying. But if I gave this problem my all and I tried to develop a solution, I knew that I would never regret not being all in. Fortunately, we have been able to figure out how to build the platform, how to sell it, and most importantly, how to actually make sure that this platform can help people during emergencies. We've been deployed for floods and fires and hazardous material spills and also day-to-day emergencies. And so being able to actually see the platform come to life and have a positive impact on communities is keeping me going now every day, because it's not just something in my mind, like, it's something that I can see having the impact that we always wanted to have.
Amazing. That's all you can dream of, honestly. Yep. And can you translate that to maybe advice? Like, not everyone can start a disaster relief platform. And not everyone is, I mean, as serious and large as the issue is, not everyone can attach passion to it to the depth that you have today. So how can people get started in their personal lives if they want to start something? Yeah,
absolutely. So I don't think we need to have all of the answers. We don't need to have like that big thing figured out. We don't need the answers to our life's question about our passions and everything in order to develop something that we are thrilled about. I think what we need to do is just follow our curiosity. Like, it started with me just asking questions. It started by me asking, why didn't I have information? And then I'm interviewing firefighters. I'm like, well, why couldn't you give me information? Like, why couldn't you get information to people like me? And I learned, oh, they don't actually have that information themselves. And then I'm like, well, why don't they have that information? And I just kept asking questions and questions and questions. And not everyone's gonna start a disaster management company, and I wouldn't recommend that they do. However, if you can find something that you're curious about, something that you just wanna keep pulling those threads around, I mean, that is the thing that can light you up every day. And if you're developing something that helps solve someone's problems, whether it's evacuating, like something so severe, or something as simple as making sure that they're not shivering in their house every day because they have terrible circulation in their hands. What's wrong with me? Like, even being able to solve something like that, I'm gonna be real. I bought some fuzzy socks from Target today, and my feet have been so freezing. And I'm genuinely grateful that someone decided to invent fuzzy socks. And
seriously,
I don't need them for an evacuation, but they are going to have a positive impact on my life. And so I think what we want to do, and what really helps to maintain that like honeymoon phase, is to just get into what makes us curious, like really ask those questions, and to look for somebody to serve. I think if you're serving someone, whether it's at this high level or like lower level, if you're serving someone and you're really excited about it, then you're gonna wake up every day excited to keep showing up. And I think that a lot of us have like the desire to serve ingrained in us. And I think if we can tap into both our curiosity and that desire to serve and to have a positive impact on the world, then we'll find something that really lights us up and keeps us motivated and persistent.
No, I love, you really answered it to a T. Like, I love every single piece of advice that you've given there. And to that note, on pieces of advice, what are some pieces of advice, like more tactically speaking, going off of that, on how someone could get started with something? Like, what can they do literally right as soon as they turn off this episode?
The very first thing I would do is start asking questions about the areas of my life where I'm most interested. So if you're listening to this and you're like, literally, what can I do this second? Get a pen or a piece of paper or whatever you like to brainstorm with and start a list of things that you have some kind of interest in or curiosity about. Instead of expecting that you're going to come up with the company in one sitting, just commit to asking more questions when you are in those areas.
Yes.
So let's say you're curious about fashion and you're curious about sustainability and you really love really good design and you want things to be functional. Maybe you're curious about minimalism, so you don't want to, figure out how to come up with on-trend pieces of clothing every, quarter. Instead, you want to come up with things that could be like staples that make it so you don't have to keep buying clothes,
Exactly.
Just keep asking yourself those questions, and I think that is what separates someone who's on the path to be an entrepreneur versus someone who's maybe on a path to go a different direction. Is if you're asking those questions all the time, you eventually will definitely find something that you want to pour yourself into.
100%.
And I think that's really that's a big part of our journey on the planet, is figuring out where are my skills, what am I curious about, and how can I dive into those in a way that uplifts the world and leaves it better than I found it.
That's amazing. I really relate to that sentiment, and that's how I wake up every day operating. You ended on a really beautiful piece of advice that I want it to sit with people. I want people to turn off this episode, literally go and grab that pen and paper or go on to notes on their iPhone and start typing. That would be my goal. So thank you so much for your time. Once again, congratulations on Forbes 30 under 30. That's insane. And the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, oh my God, I'm just so inspired by you every day. And I love everything you said today. So thank you. And with that, thank you guys so much for another awesome episode of Start Something. We hope you come back. We hope you continue to watch this. And if you have any thoughts or feedback, please let us know.
Yeah, and if there's anything about the startup journey that you're particularly curious about, definitely leave us a comment and let us know. We are going to be making a lot of episodes this year about our experiences, but if there's anything that could provide immediate value to you, definitely don't hesitate to leave a comment, because we will definitely respond with an episode.
Yeah,
okay.
Don't worry.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
See you.
Bye!